Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience. Thank you for taking time in your busy lives to join us today. Hi, my name is Wei Chang, first VP for the ISACA New York Metropolitan Chapter. Welcome to the Leadership Series, a Leader's Perspective Spotlight 5 and ISACA New York Metropolitan Original. The purpose of this leadership series is to have a leader's leader come in each month to speak with their insights in alignment to the 8 steps to developing people. Our speaker spotlight for today is Fareed Abdelkader, Global Head of Technology, Audit and Associate General Auditor, VP at New York Life, and also the current president of the ISACA New York Metropolitan Chapter. We have Chad Reyes as well, co-founder of Lions Pride Leadership, who will help us navigate through the 8 steps to developing people by providing additional information and insights on how to apply these steps in our lives. We are extremely grateful to have Chad here, who has been personally mentored by John C. Maxwell. John C. Maxwell is a best-selling author, coach, and speaker, often called the country's #1 leadership authority. You may have recalled John C. Maxwell speaking live at our 2021 virtual gala, which was well attended. We will spend 15 minutes to cover the background for the leadership series with Chad Reyes and myself. After that, we'll have 40 minutes on Fareed's leadership presentation on step 6, character, which will be followed by a 20-minute question and answer panel with Fareed, Chad, and myself. This is a free event to members, non-members, and students. You will receive 1 CP for attending this event. You can enter your questions live in the chat box, and we will answer them during the Q&A portion of this presentation. The first 5 people to send in questions to the panel will be provided free mentoring sessions through Lions Pride Leadership, a $299 value. As a recap of the speaker spotlight that we had in the past, in December of last year, we kicked off the leadership series with our speaker spotlight on Jim Abbassini, CISO for IGI and former president of the ISACA New York Metropolitan Chapter. Jim covered step 1, you are here. He presented on the long and winding road covering his career timeline. In the second of the series, in February of this year, we had our speaker spotlight on Nigel James, Managing Director, Head of Transformation, Operations, and Practices at Morgan Stanley Internal Audit. Nigel is a former board member of the New York chapter. He covered step 2, identify. Nigel presented how to identify key individuals on building a successful team. In our third installment of the series in April of this year, we had Chad Reyes as our speaker spotlight. Chad presented on step 3, awareness. He talked on how awareness changes everything. On the 4th installment of the leadership series, in June of this year, our speaker spotlight was supposed to be on John Piccarello, co-founder and chief leadership officer of Lions Pride Leadership. Unfortunately, John couldn't make it, so Chad had to present on his behalf on step 4, giftedness. Chad demonstrated how giftedness can give us a competitive edge. We will cover step 5 styles in our upcoming leadership series event scheduled for January 2023. Ken Drinkard will be our speaker spotlight. Ken is the SVP and Chief Audit Executive at New York Life. We will have my co-presenter, Tina Bacchus, be the moderator for that session. For this session, Fareed will cover step 6, character. Be sure to check out our leadership page on isacany.org to view our previously recorded sessions. I'm now going to turn it over to Chad. Hey, Chad.
Hey, Wei. Thank you for that. I appreciate the introduction. Hey, everyone. I'm excited to be with you today. My name is Chad Reyes. I am the co-founder of Lions Pride Leadership, and we're going to continue with our leadership continuum. As Wei had said, about a year ago, Fareed and the board at ISACA came to me and said, I have this idea of creating this leadership continuum around the framework, your 8 steps to developing people. And if you know me, I love people, but I also love developing people. I love awakening them to their potential. So when Fareed came to me and the team and they said, well, let's create a whole series of this over the next 2 years, what would that look like? It excited me because I'm like, wow, we get the ability to make an impact, develop people to reach their potential, which leads us to today. So I'm going to share with you on my screen in a moment. Let me bring that up. Hold on. You should be able to see that now. So on my screen, let's go there. There you go. So my partner and I, we created something called the Master Operating System. This is the 8 areas every organization has. If you notice on there, finances is not on there. And the reason is that if you do these 8 areas well, finances is a byproduct. Now, that being the case, the one area, because I get asked this a lot when I'm speaking to groups and developing leaders, out of all 8, which is the one that is the most important? And I say often that the people part of it, it probably contributes to about 75% of the success of any organization, any division, any company. And the reason being is this: you can't build an organization without leading people. And that's where this leadership continuum is. So I just want to say kudos to Fareed, kudos to the board at ISACA NYC, because you guys get it. I speak to a lot of people around leadership, and so, some people don't, they get it. So that being the case, Wade just shared before about the 8 steps to developing people, right? So these are the 8 steps. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on character. And then we're going to be going in January with Ken Drinkard on styles, and then moving over to motivation and journey to wrap up the series. But I want to go a little bit deeper today. I want to spend maybe 5 minutes or so. I want to go a little bit deeper on what is character, because we hear character a lot, and really what constitutes character. So I want to, for a moment, just get you to think through this. Take the number 10 and 100. So picture you're creating this company, or you're creating this ingredient, and you're looking to get the maximum output. And you have the number 10 and 100. So there are 4 types of people. There are dividers, there are subtractors, there are adders, and there are multipliers. And when you take that number 10 and 100, dividers take 100 divided by 10, and they make the output 10. So think about it. You started with 100, and now you're at 10. With subtractors, they take 100 that they're given, and they turn it into 90. Still not a good return. But this is where the tide changes now, where you go to adders. Adders take 100, and they add 10 to it, and they get 110. Output's better than where you started. But guys, if there's anything I share with you, this is the key. Organizations are looking for. Entrepreneurs are looking for multipliers. These are people that take the 10 and 100, and they turn it into 1,000. And you can see on the screen, these are some of the characteristics or attributes of dividers, subtractors, adders, and multipliers. But before we jump in with Fareed today, I want to share this statement, and I encourage you to write it down. So, if you have a piece of paper in front of you, write this down, because I had a coach share this with me many years ago, and it tremendously changed and shifted my life. And what he said is this: he said, Chad, remember this. Producers produce more than they consume. Producers produce more than they consume. And consumers consume more than they produce. So I just want you to take that in for a moment. Producers produce more than they consume. Consumers consume more than they produce. We live in a world right now that's telling everything. They're telling people, give as little as you can. Don't worry about it. You don't have to give everything. Guys, that's never a way to get ahead, especially as a leader. One of the things I know about multipliers is they always give more than they take. And whether you're an employee in a company, whether you own the company and you're looking at your customers, I always want to challenge you to give more than you take. And when you do that, you become a multiplier. And that has a lot to do with character, because today we're going to be talking about character, and Fareed's going to take you on a journey around his leadership journey, around this whole step of character. But I just want to share this with you, that character is who you are when no one's watching. Just remember that. Character is who you are when no one's watching. So are you a person that when no one's watching, you try to take as, you're a consumer and you consume as much as possible and give as little as possible? Or do you always give more than you take? And the key to the success of this leadership journey, and the key of you being all that you can, reaching your potential and fulfilling it, is giving more to people, giving more. If you work at a company, giving it more to the company. If you own the company, giving it more to your team members and giving it more to your customers. But live a life of surplus. And when you do that, you radically shift outcomes in your life. And I know Fareed is going to talk a lot about that today, about what's occurred in his career over the last 20 years and how he's moved to being a multiplier. I've known Fareed for over 20 years. And the one thing that I can tell you is that he is a true leader and he is a true multiplier. And I've seen it because I've seen him 20 years ago when we had just graduated college. And I see it today with him leading global companies and leading organizations. And the reason why I can say he's this leader and he has a high level of character when it comes to it, because he always takes something and makes it better. He never gives, you give him 100 and he gives you back 90. I've never seen that in his life. You give him 100, he gives you back 1,000. That's what the leader is. That's what a multiplier is. And with that, I want to introduce you to my friend Fareed Abdelkader.
Thank you very much for that, Chad. Very warm introduction. Appreciate you. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, let me know if you could see that. Can you guys? Are you seeing the screen there?
Yeah, we can
Yes, Fareed, we see it.
What do you see? You see the slide?
The ISACA New York Metropolitan Chapter slide.
Okay, perfect. I don't see the band around it. Okay. So thank you very much for that, Chad. Just a little bit about me. And you're seeing the full screen, correct?
Yes, it's a full screen now with the slide with your picture.
Perfect. All right. As Chad had mentioned before, and so did Wei, I am the new Global Head of Technology Audit and Associate General Auditor at New York Life. I was a former Managing Director of Protiviti Risk Management Consulting, leading out the cybersecurity audit practice. I'm also Executive Officer of Yellow Boots, Staten Island Long-Term Recovery Organization, and I was recently elected to the NIDIS, which is one of the largest nonprofit disaster relief organizations in the world. My pride and joy is trying to give back in any way possible, whether it's through advocacy, which is that this photo up here, the ISACA organization, any type of consulting, community affairs, things of that nature. And if you're ever willing to volunteer and want to help out in any way in New York City or globally, we have connections with that. And ISACA has really welcomed this in a very big way. So feel free to reach out to membership at isacanewyork.org if you're interested. This is pretty much my life. I mean, we do work all over the world. This was Ecuador during the earthquakes. We did quite a bit of community service in America. This was in Pasadena, Texas, after Hurricane Harvey. These are oyster implementations in Staten Island to break water. Really cool stuff all around. So the agenda today, as Chad had mentioned, we're kind of jumping around a little bit. We're going to do Principle 6, which is character. And then Ken Drinkard, who's the Associate General Auditor of New York Life, will actually come in January and speak about style. And that guy has a serious amount of style. So I'm personally looking forward to that. One of the biggest things in leadership, and especially when it comes down to understanding your team, is the why. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about the makeup of character impact on teaming and quality. Chad touched upon that with the dividers, the adders, subtractors, and so on. Leveraging the power of a few to positively impact the many. And that's an interesting play, and we'll get into some techniques there. General leadership anecdotes, and some of them you may be aware of. John C. Maxwell's 25-50-25, the 4 V's, the voice, vote, veto, is really, really big. Types of leaders styles is very important. So there's a lot of content here. I'm going to ask that if any questions come in, add them to the question list, and we'll certainly hit them as time permits. So one of the biggest things in terms of leading anyone is building rapport with them. And one of the biggest ways to build rapport with anyone is understanding their why. What is our why? Why are we here today? Why do we do what we do? What is our vision, our focus? Why are our employees doing what they do? What makes them wake up in the morning? What makes them have the ambitions and goals, right? And then leveraging that why for the benefit of our greater unified goal. So understanding your team's why is the first step to building rapport and the relationship. And the funny thing is that the relationships are everything. You cannot lead anyone unless they're willing to receive you. And that can be, even if you're in a position of power, you're a manager, you're managing staff. If you're a position player, I am the manager, you must listen to me. That'll only work so far. And it may work in a transactional format, but it will not work in a transitional format or transformational format. So, you know, you may hear some pettiness about, maybe you're out to dinner and someone makes a complaint like, oh, you know, this person doesn't look like they have any pride in their work. The real question becomes, what is their why? Do they have any incentive to do any better in the scenario? Are they just looking for a job? Is it just a paycheck? Are they doing it for their family? Are they doing it for the pride, stepping up the corporate ladder? Are they doing it because it makes them intrigued and tries to build on a larger goal, something they have personally? Is it just about the money? What is your why? And once you start to understand people's why, you can start to build that rapport and shape around that team. So just something to remember, when the why is big enough, the how is easy, right? So if you're fighting for your family, people are gonna do grunt work and do things that they don't want to do, right? If something isn't good enough for them, they're not going to take that extra mile. So understanding your team, understanding yourself, you start to ask yourself, what is the motivation that's going to drive this? It's really something to really think about. It's not as easy as it seems, because a lot of people aren't going to open up so quickly to you. And if you're a position player and you're transactional, you'll never truly understand the why of your team. So it is important to be very genuine. And we'll talk about character and how different traits of character, of a person's character, can really open that up. So one of the biggest things we talk about when it comes down to character is that, you know, people seem to think, and Chad said this perfectly before, that character is something that's kind of ironed out over someone's life. And it's something that kind of precedes the person. It's not something that can be mimicked. It's not something that can be forged. You can't fake it, because the reality is it's something that's ironed out over the course of your entire life. Everything that you have done over your entire life, different positions that you've been in, different types of struggles that you've been through, have built this character. It's a part of your DNA. And a result of that, an impression isn't your character. You know, they say the first impression is the most important impression, and it certainly is, because that's the first visual you're giving to someone. But if you fake it to make it, they'll only work for so long. And it's very clear. So when you ask yourself about a leader's leader, right? And remember, a leader's leader is a leader that creates other leaders. Whereas a positional player or a general leader would be someone who creates many followers. Very different tactic, multiplying effect versus the adding effect. So if you look at some of these characteristics right here, you would say, oh yeah, this looks like common sense. This looks pretty straightforward. But all these are general characteristics. If you take any one of these specific characteristics and you put someone in different types of scenarios throughout their life, throughout their career, you'll start to see different elements of how that specific characteristic impact the individual. Did they get fired in the 2008, 2009 crisis? Are they more restrained as a result of it? Or do they save more? Do they have more patience with people because they know that there could be the opportunity to lose their job? Are they willing to compromise? Different things in your life, having children, jumping from job to job, having loyalty, sticking with one company, whatever they are, over the course of your career, literally come together and build your DNA. And the reason why we're putting so much focus on this is because you cannot fake it to make it. You cannot BS what your character is. It precedes you. It's something that can be said about you, and it takes a lifetime to create. And a lot of it isn't even intentional. It just happens to be the fact that we are creatures of habit. We are forged in a certain way. We're conditioned to be the way that we are. So there's a huge impact as a result of this. And Chad talked a little bit about this, right? If you start to build rapport with your team and you start to see the general characteristics of that team, you'll start to find those leaders that have the potential to lead other people and become leaders like themselves. Those are the multipliers that we talked about before. You may find some folks that get the job done, and they're the people that really have that individual contribution. They have the ability to do it, and they do it flawlessly. And they can show other people how to do it, but they cannot recreate themselves. Those are the adders. They're not necessarily bad. They just don't hit at the speed of building that leadership team that you're looking for. The dividers are probably the most disastrous of any team. And they're there. They're in every single company. They're in every organization. Doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit organization where you're not getting paid, the volunteers, or if it's going to be somewhere you're getting paid. These are the people that actually take a liking from cutting other people down. In some cases, they cut other people down to lift themselves up, but they're detrimental to the process when that does happen. And then you have the subtractors, where they find the excuses and everything to be the reason why they aren't where they should be. And so the real question becomes, in meeting with your teams and building that rapport with the teams and really trying to see your teams in different lights, you start to ask yourself, who plays what role in your team and how can that be managed? So this comes from a framework from the book, The Power of People, the 4 kinds of people you can change in your life by Verna Cornelia Price. So if you're ever interested in that, you can get more details there. So when it comes down to character impact, Chad talked about this, but John C. Maxwell said it well when he said, a leader who produces other leaders multiplies their influences. So if you're in an environment where there's some level of agility and you're trying to make that leader's leader, it goes beyond the team. It goes beyond the company in many cases. It becomes an industry perspective. You start to break outside your specific role. You start to attract others to the general cause. And when you really think about these dividers, subtractors, and so on, the book Leader Shift by John C. Maxwell, you could tell I like John C. Maxwell. He's a very, very excellent leadership coach, and learned a lot from him. Went to a seminar recently, actually with Chad a few weeks ago on a few topics. And one that came up was the 25-50-25 principle of change rule. And he says, whenever you cast vision and challenge people to cut through the tension and achieve something greater, people fall into 3 groups. And this is so true. I've seen it in every organization I've built teams in. 25% will go to the leader. They will trust the leader inherently because someone has edified them and they trust that person's judgment. About 50% or so will fall into this group where they're kind of indifferent, they're malleable, people that can be easily convinced or in either direction. And then you'll have, once again, those dividers and subtractors that will literally try to trip you up throughout the process. The goal is to try to get as quickly as possible your understanding of the team, to understand who your supporters are. And those are pretty easy to find. You'll see the ones that are reaching out, trying to help as best they can and trying to really step up and trying to pair the 25% to the 50%. And if you get the book Leader Shift, and I have some recommendations on books at the end of this training, you'll start to see that there's a lot there that you could leverage in your everyday life. So completing that puzzle piece of building that team will make a well-harmonized team. So now what I would say is, and I'm not sure, Sam, if there are any questions coming in, just let me know if you start to see anything. I don't want to move up too quickly, but let me know. And as we have a few, we'll take a break. So just something to think about here, guys. And if there's anything you take away from this entire process, I would tell you right now, it's the power of communication and messaging. This is probably by far the most important principle there is. I had to learn this in a personal aspect of my life, and this comes down to relationships. This comes down to dealing with a boss, dealing with an employee, dealing during difficult times. You can imagine how communication and messaging has broken down in this remote work environment. Imagine sending an email and then having someone insinuate the rest of the email because the communication wasn't clear. Think about the personal relationships with a significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, and the texting turning into something that you weren't expecting. One analogy I use here is that communication and messaging are different things. Messaging is the transmission method. It's the communication. It's the gel capsule of a medicine, and communication will be the medicine within the gel cap. And that's the transport delivery method into your body. It's how your body receives it. If you put that medicine in a gel cap, your body will receive it well. If you put that in a piece of tin metal, your body's never going to break it down. The message is not going to, the communication is not going to get across. So your messaging is just as important as the communication that you're trying to get across. So they have to receive it well. And that's how you build rapport. Very important. Also very important. And yes, we'll share the deck with the team afterwards. Having clear and concise communication, expectations, roles, and output on every meeting that you have is important. Now, it's a two-way street. Very important, because if you really think about this, you need to distinguish between the preferences of the leader and the staff, the expectations and the demand. Very, very important. Setting a frequency and a cadence with the team to have that communication two ways is just as important. One thing to take away here, guys, is that, and I learned this in a personal relationship a very long time ago, proving a point, and there's a pun there, and it's intended, doesn't help anyone. If to prove someone right, or prove someone, if we're trying to prove someone wrong, at the end of the day, we're all wrong, because you end up damaging the relationship. And the relationship, as I mentioned before, is everything. So it's starting to make those investments and give different types of considerations. Consider this, let's consider that, we should, goes a very long way to opening and building that rapport and that trust. I talked about this in the last couple of leadership series. The informal communication is gone. The water cooler is missing. So what do we mean by that? Every conversation that we have is intentional. You want to have a communication, most of us are working remotely. What do? You set up a Teams meeting, you set up a Zoom meeting, blue jeans, you name it. You're having those kind of communications, and they're intentional because they're on someone's calendar. So we don't have that emotional intelligence being built up by our teams. They don't understand what good looks like because they can't hear when someone's upset. If someone's snapping, they can't read the room. The room isn't there, just a box is. So having those periodic check-ins, I ask every one of you guys to just ping someone and set up a video chat with people on your team. Start to build that rapport. Start to set up 15-minute stand-ups with your management team. Why? Because you're not going to speak about work for 15 minutes. You'll build that rapport. You'll build that trust. You'll start to get some insights that maybe you would have gotten at the water cooler. The power of relationships. Relationships can make or break a team. If you can't trust in each other, you have no team. If you don't have credibility, you have no trust, you have no team. Being able to build that relationship means that you could actually take more pain. You can have, the team will run miles more for you. You'll run miles more for them because it goes beyond the transaction. It goes to the greater good. Telegraphing your value system. Dr. Chris Auger is a Navy SEAL. He's a doctor as well. This guy is an absolute, I mean, he's a genius when it comes down to leadership. And he, believe it or not, just joined the John C. Maxwell, the Lions Pride Leadership Continuum here with Chad. He's a part of that team. He talks about telegraphing your value system. If I have my value system that I'm not willing to bend for anyone, and the team knows that, they'll never cross that value system unless it's intentional. So they'll not unintentionally do it. And why that's important is because if you think that someone's best interest is at heart and they're not willing to cross that line, you'll have inherent trust. Accepting your role in feedback, huge character trait. If you cannot accept your role in feedback, there will be a communication breakdown. People will not trust to tell you the truth. If you've overstepped the boundary, they wouldn't even know to tell you if there is a boundary. Being available and approachable is extremely important, and Chris talked about this as well. This doesn't just mean that the open door policy, the open ear policy, I'm here to listen to you. This is extremely important. It's being mentally available and being approachable from a receiving standpoint. John C. Maxwell talked about assumptions coming from a lack of questions. People feeling that fear of asking questions because they may not come off in the right way. It may not be received well. But the reality is, taking a direction, going the wrong direction from the start is a communication breakdown. And Eric Thomas, a very good leader as well, a few weeks back, talked about words having matter and making the words count, not watering down the message. I know how this can be perceived, and sometimes things are verbose. You know, you talk in circles, you're talking in riddles, you're trying to have a dialogue. But sometimes when things are important enough, they have to be as concise as possible. When it comes down to work, that's one of them. We have a project, we have a mission, we have a goal. Let's be very clear and very specific about it. Let's be surgical. So there's a lot of material, like I said, and I'm seeing questions coming in right now, and we'll get to those questions in a bit. And I apologize that we have so much material. It's good stuff, but just we'll get through it. Something that's extremely important, and we will send this deck out, is Guild's hierarchy of messaging. I saw this and it was a big wake-up call for me. It made me think about some things in the past that I learned, and I learned it the hard way, right? You know those team members, maybe yourself, where you send a few emails and you start realizing you're like 5 emails in, back and forth with someone, and the whole world is copied on it. And you're like, Jesus, what's going on right now? I had a very good leader that I consider a mentor, Barbie Goldstein, at my prior employment. She's an amazing woman, a very strong leader's leader. And she made a small point that just had a lot of impact on me. And she said, after a few emails, everything starts to be taken out of context. People start to fill in the blanks, if you will. Pick up the phone, have that communication. And it really kind of shows the bigger picture when you look at this image. If you look at top down, we certainly have more emails than we have in-person interactions, right? Safe to say. Keep those emails for just decisions, yes and no, binary stuff. It's more of a compliance thing. Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Here's just a debrief. And the in-person stuff, the video, the yammer, the chatting, that's where you're going to be building your rapport with your team, the bonding, the trust, the alignment, that rapport that we're talking about. That's going to be coming in the in-person environment. So I won't spend too much time on this. It's an eye chart, but if you look top to bottom, that's extremely important. And one of the biggest leaders of our country, Abraham Lincoln, talked about no man being good enough to govern anyone else without their consent. If someone isn't willing to receive the message, we talk about communication and messaging, how can you lead them if they're not willing to receive your message? If they're not willing to give you consent after they receive the message? So there's a lot to that, right? If you can't communicate with someone, you can't build that rapport, you can't earn that trust, you can't set up that two-way communication, you'll never be able to lead anyone. So here's some stats. As you can imagine, communication messaging really is big. And there's a fairly large survey by Smart last year, 3 in 4 employees said they want their leaders to have effective, transparent communication. In another survey of 2,100 leaders, okay, if you look at this chart, communication skills, interpersonal skills, which is really communication and messaging, accounted for almost 50% of skills on top leaders. Values and ethics, personal attributes pointed to the integrity and character of the individual, and credibility as well. So if you look at that, between communication, messaging, and your moral ethics, those are some of the top leadership characteristics that are out there. Another survey, just to kind of really drive it home, high ethical and moral standards, 195 global leaders, high ethical and moral standards, once again, integrity of the individual, and then guidelines, direction, communication, flexibility, communication, it's communication and messaging all over again. And when someone's willing to listen, when someone's willing to receive the message, when someone's willing to fight for the team, their name will precede them. And John C. Maxwell said, people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. They need to sign off on the person. Is the person with the message someone credible? Is someone that's speaking have the backing? Are they going to support me as much as I'm supporting them? Okay, so something here, and this is we talk about, and I see a lot of questions coming in, so we will be asking questions shortly here. We'll be answering them. I apologize. So key character indicators. We talk about KPIs when it comes down to risk management, audit, you name it. We talk about key performance indicators. We talk about key risk indicators, KRIs. But something that I consider, I really think about, and this is me personally, and I spoke to a lot of leaders and they feel the same way about this. You can't learn someone, you can't learn about them in a 5-minute conversation. You're not going to know about someone even in a job interview that's 1 hour. But the fastest way to really learn about someone's character, it says a lot about the person, is to study certain little elements. And what I'm going to do right now on this slide is talk about the quick elements that can give you a fairly quick feedback, and then talk about the top 5 traits that should be developed on a leader to really drive you into this leader mentality, the multiplier effect. So our first one is, what's someone's character during success? When they're doing well, do they put the team in front of them? When they fail or they perceive, and believe me, this is actually very important, perceived failure. So you ever have those people that come out of a test and they're saying, oh, I definitely failed, and they got the 100. Same thing in the work world. People think they did bad in a presentation and they did very well and they didn't realize it. Maybe they're throwing people under a bus. Very important to kind of read the room and see what is coming out of failure. Are they willing to accept their role in the feedback, as we mentioned before? Are they willing to seek others and try to learn from the mistake? How they are under pressure? Are they snapping on people? Are they setting misdirection? Are they going in circles? How are they in your absence? Everyone knows about that. Speaking behind the back, speaking to the broader team. How are they, and this is a big one, and Abraham Lincoln actually said this, if you want to test someone's character, give them responsibility. Very true. Very, very true. And then we talked about receiving feedback. So a lot of material here, but if you look at these elements, this will tell you basic characteristics in a quicker capacity. And that could be another way to kind of see how to maneuver and how much trust you can have with working with someone. And there are ways to kind of work around it, depending on that rapport you have with the person to really have a conversation. If it's your staff, you could easily connect with them. If they're your superior, it's going to be a little bit difficult. That's something you'd have to manage. But the top 5 leadership traits, it's actually really a good book. The Greats on Leadership. Jocelyn Davis talks about the 5 leadership character traits. And this is a really cool chart, but just to go quickly through this for the sake of time. If you look at this, empathy is on the bottom, right? And empathy, if you don't care, you're indifferent. If you care too much, you could be manic, you could be obsessive. And at the same time, on the courageous side, if you don't care at all, I'm sorry, if you, on the courage side, if you are fearful and timid, you'll be perceived as such. But if someone's right out of the gate, willing to kind of go, quote unquote, guns blazing, they'll be on the rash side. Same thing with integrity. If you hold back too much, you'll be perceived as deceitful. And if you say too much to someone, you may come off as offensive. So trying to kind of identify the fact that you're working within these boundaries and really making a cognitive effort to move towards the middle could be another way of forging that over time. It's not going to be overnight. Another very important principle are the 4 V's. This is amazing. Dr. Chris Auger talked about this. Also Forbes, there's a link in the bottom when you receive the deck you can actually go to. Really amazing stuff. Before asking for ideas or opinions from anyone in your team in any scenario, be very, very clear on letting each person in the room know if they have a view, a voice, a vote, or a veto. A view is just a perspective, their thought on the subject, but there's no inclination of them taking that information and being part of your solution. The voice, maybe there's someone on the team that has a really good idea, and you want to make sure that you get feedback from that person, that you'll take their voice into a recommendation on something that you'll eventually vote on, which means that you're tallying it. Everyone has a true stake in what the outcome is. And then being very, very clear on the team who can veto. It's me, it's my boss, it's the auditor in charge, it's the chief risk officer, whatever the case may be. And understanding at the end of the day, that consensus doesn't mean that everyone's happy or in full agreement. It just means that they're willing to live with the decision, which, by the way, is enough. As long as your team knows that they have a voice, that's enough sometimes, because it takes away that autonomous mentality. And when someone vetoes, which should be rare, you're taking the voice away from the team and bringing it back to an individual. And that's why I have that in capital. It's bringing it back to the individual. So that should be seldom be used, and communication should be very clear on why that happened. And that should be very clear, and the messaging should be soft on what that is. The types of leaders. There's two major types of leaders that really play into the grand scheme of things. This is gold right now, and you have all seen this. One of them is the transactional leader, and one is the transformational leader. Who is your manager right now? Are they a transactional person? Is it just about output? This is important, right? If we're working on a conveyor belt, it's how many widgets are we making? If we're flipping burgers, how many burgers are we delivering? Is there anything, is there a bigger story behind it? I think everyone we know don't really like to be in a transactional environment, right? Because the reality is that transactional leaders, they use their position of authority to assert power. I want this by this day, that's the deliverable. It's binary. You're giving it to me or you're not giving it to me. Whereas the transformational leader is leaning in towards someone's giftedness, their character, their competency, and leveraging that for the good of the team. We're going to put you in this position, and that's your giftedness. And I want you, and I want to make investments in you to do something much bigger in this and transform how this is going to be delivered, add this much more value. Transactional, very compliance driven. Yes, no, checkbox. Whereas transformational really delivers on something long-term, more of a commitment, right? The reward, I think, is one of the most important things out of this. When someone's delivering the widgets, when it's transactional, it's X and Y, you know what your output is. It's very binary, right? It's very X plus Y equals X plus Y. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? But the reality is the reward's much different. It's exponential when it comes down to transformational. You're getting paid X plus Y, but you're also getting that pride. You're building self-esteem in the team. You're building joy on the team and wanting them to build something bigger for the organization. You're actually getting an X factor out of it. You're building leaders on your team that want other people to be a part of it. You're developing an attraction that wants to create, that wants to suck more positivity into it, right? I work for X company. This is where I am. You see the pride, you see it on social media, you see people wanting to go to work. They're not fearing the Sunday, right? And supervision as a result of that works in the same alignment. If someone's doing the widgets, you need to micromanage them, get the delivery, X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. Supervision is very different when it comes down to transformational leaders. Those people are working weekends because they want to work weekends. They want to show the pride in the work they have. And transformational leaders instill that. They make it bigger than the obstacle. The goal is bigger than the obstacle. And I just want to get down some closing thoughts here, and we'll hit these questions. We'll hit the questions in a forum fashion with Chad. But, you know, we talked about the impression. One can manipulate a first impression, right? But a character impresses on in one's absence. It precedes the owner. They talk about your reputation can be built over a lifetime, and one error can take it all down. It's not as easy with character, because when you have character, people know the person you are and what your intent is. It takes a lot more to take someone's character down, right? You can put all, you could try to, you know, have media mess with it. You can have all these different people talk all the different quote unquote trash about an individual. But if someone stands for something, they will not flex that. They will not change what that is. And that's appreciated by the broader team. So some quotes that kind of leave off here with, one of them is, and I hear this a lot from different teams, and this even comes from high performance teams, believe it or not. They talk about not having enough time. But if you really think about it, we have 24 hours in a day. Sometimes it really comes down to focus, direction, delegation, and clarity in terms of communication. Zig Ziglar spoke to that. Another one from Billy Graham I thought was pretty interesting was, when wealth is lost, nothing's lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, everything is lost. And then knowledge will give you power, but character, respect. Bruce Lee, one of our all-time leaders there, right? If you really think about it. And reputation is for a time, character for an eternity. This right here sums it all up with character being formed over time. So we'll open up with some general questions and thoughts here. Something John C. Maxwell said, he said this a few weeks ago, and he says it quite a bit. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. They want to know that you're open to them, and then they'll open up to you. And Maya said something very, very aligned to that. People will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So having that real impact to the individual for the sake of the larger goal goes a long way. You know, and Lao Tzu talked about you not knowing where the leader is. A true leader is in the background. And when the success is there, the whole team will feel that they were the ones that led it the entire time. These are some books I strongly recommend that we read. So Chad, I'll ask that you come on video, and we'll go walk through some of these questions if you don't mind.
Sure. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
All right.
All right. So looks like you got them.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start with the first question from Vincent. He was asking, I have witnessed that many managers can lose their healthy leadership characteristics when market conditions sour. For example, pipeline erodes, sales decline, their behavior negatively impacts teams' morale, often leading to retention issues, etc. Perhaps these people were never true leaders. What steps have you taken to approach a difficult conversation with a superior? And at what point would you deem the environment toxic enough for you to leave?
That's
Wow. That's a
deep
loaded
question.
one. Yeah, Chad, if you want to take a stab, I have some personal insight, but yeah, go for it.
Why don't you share first, and then I'll go from there.
Yeah. So this happens a lot, you know, especially in this market right now. I'd say this is the highest attrition I have ever seen in my entire life. So if you look at any consulting firm, you look at any organization, you can't hire talent fast enough. And now with this new law that was just released in New York City, with salaries being out in the open, there's gonna be even much more demand than there was in the past in terms of trying to retain talent. So when you're seeing so much chaos and you're looking for stability, and that boss isn't stable, you see how erratic they are. They can't make decisions. They're kind of all over the place. They're changing their mind constantly. Believe it or not, they're the first one that wants to look for that stability. So trying to provide that person with stability goes a very long way. Being very clear in terms of how you can assist them and letting them know where your clear boundaries are. I'm telling you right now, when that's happening, and I was living in it for many years, and it happens a lot. In some cases, I was that person until I realized I was that person. And sometimes it's out of your control. You can only control yourself. You can't control anyone else. And unfortunately, in leadership, you need those people to be supporting you because you're supporting someone else. It's a chain, right? So we need to make sure that you have someone you can lean on, that you have that trusted relationship. So with those superiors, what I've done in the past is I clearly set what the boundaries were and said what I was willing to contribute to help ease their pain. And then I tried to look for my A team and people that I could rely on and let them know that I had the folks that I was very clear about who they were that could help us out in the scenario. I also was very clear with them to let them know that their attitude and actions was negatively impacting the team. Very negatively impacting.
Yeah.
So if you say I can appreciate, and I had some folks, I'll tell you right now, there's some managers, I love them to this day, that worked underneath me that would tell me, Fareed, you're showing so-and-so, or you're coming off a little hostile, maybe didn't realize it, whatever the case may be. And them coming in with their arms open and really explaining that to me, because I received that well, really helped tailor my reactions going forward from that time. So really opening up that communication and training, and it matters how you do. I'm telling you, once again, it's messaging. How do you message that something's coming off wrong? Okay. Now, that was a lot, but having that conversation and then setting your own boundary. If nothing changes and you really gave it your real attempt and you were very clear on where those boundaries were, and those boundaries, your value system, my family, I need to be home to see my kids during this time, continues to get encroached on, then you've done everything you possibly can to at least leave that team, not the organization, but maybe it's time to leave that team. That's my perspective on it. I've had conversations with dozens of folks that were in the same position, and it worked out very well, as long as they telegraph their throw. I'm very serious about this. This is the situation. This is what I'm willing to do to help you out. But I really need to let you know where my boundaries are. I just want to be very clear, there's a lot going on, and just really letting that go. I'm like, listen, no disrespect here. The messaging is clear. I really want to help, but this is impacting, and just let it go there. That's why they're getting paid the way they're getting paid. And maybe it's the cost of doing business. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that kind of business. Chad?
Yeah, no, I think, Fareed, what you shared is very timely, very important, and definitely on point. You shared something earlier. I have it on I took a picture of it, so I'm going back into it. But you said that character during success, character during failure and perceived failure, character under pressure, character in your absence, character when given elevated responsibility, and character when receiving feedback. I think for everyone that's on this call, I think they need to really embrace that, Fareed, because I give the analogy often of lemons. And I say, you squeeze a lemon, what comes out? Lemon juice. When you squeeze people, what comes out? Whatever's inside, right? So I think for this question, the question was, I've witnessed many managers and they can lose their healthy leadership characteristics. I would even challenge and say maybe they didn't have healthy leadership characteristics. Maybe they had a facade of who they were. Now, that doesn't mean at times that leaders don't get rattled. It doesn't mean that at times leaders are not frustrated. But when you seek a consistent pattern, maybe that's who they are. I had a coach many years ago. He said this to me. He said, Chad, when people show you who you are, believe them. Just believe them. Don't create stories around what they could be, what they aren't, what they should be. Just when they show you who they really are, believe them. And I think often those areas where Fareed was talking about the different characteristics, those are important, because when you put people under pressure, you'll see them. So that was one part of the question. The second was, perhaps were those people true leaders? And yeah, they may have been. My definition of leadership is this: it's influence. If you influence one person, you're a leader. Your influence may be little, but you're a leader. If you influence 1,000, then you have more influence. And if you influence millions, well, then you have a bigger level of influence. So if you influence people, I constitute as a leader. So I think people are leaders, but you can have bad leaders, people who negatively influence people as well. So I think when we're looking at characteristics, we put people under pressure, or we put them under success, or we put them in different scenarios where what's inside comes out. That's the first thing that I often do. The second is, I believe everyone's a leader, either positive influence or negative influence. And then the last part of that question was, what would you deem the environment toxic enough for you to lead? I can't answer that question for you. I can answer it for me. And what I would say is this, I think that question was from Vincent. What I can say, Vincent, is this, is that when you're in an environment that forces you to compromise on your values, it's time to look at a different organization that will embrace your values. That for me, that is a very clear thing. I'm very clear, and Fareed had mentioned this, I'm very clear on what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. And when you know your values, Roy Disney said this he said this many years ago, Walt Disney's brother, who helped build the Disney company. He said, when we're clear on our values, decisions become easy. So I would say that if you know your values and the organization is forcing you to become conflict with those values or even go against your values, then maybe it's time to look elsewhere. At least that would be my perspective. So I hope that helps.
That's really well said, by the way. When you kind of telegraph your values, the decisions become easy and well understood by the team because they know where you stand. So I really appreciate that. That was well said, Chad.
Thank you.
Oh, great
Anyone
answer,
else seen there?
Chad and Afreed. So the second question we have from Mohammed, he's asking, how can someone change their character or someone else's character for better? Parentheses, person.
Yeah, so I'll just say something real quick, and I'm sure Chad will have a lot there. I'm going to be very quick with this. You don't just change your character. This is something, that's why I said this before, right? We talked about, remember, we right at the end of the presentation, we talked about you can spend your whole life creating a reputation and take a minute to destroy it. That's your reputation. But the people that really know you and know what you're built of, know the love you have in your heart, know what you're willing to do for other people, that's character. You don't change that overnight. That does not change overnight. You had a bad day. You did something wrong. It was one mistake. That does not define your whole life. Everything that builds into you is your character. If it happens one time, it's out of character, right? That's not the character of the person. So if you want to change something, I strongly suggest you focus on what that change is as part of your character and focus on it as a change mechanism over a longer duration and start small. I think Atomic Habits is an awesome book, and it talks about taking those small strides to make differential habits happen. And once you make those habits happen, they become a part of your character.
Yeah,
Chad?
that's good. Yeah, so Mohammed, I would say this, that in the context of our 8 steps to developing people, so character in that capacity, I would say that being a multiplier requires conscious decisions. So just understand what I'm saying here. When you want to change your character, you have to make a decision. I'm going to give you an example. At 23 years old, I looked in the mirror, okay? And I've shared this before on this continuum. But at 23 years old, I'm just coming out of college. I don't like the man that I've become. I look in the mirror. I literally see something that I don't like. Now, everyone else around me may have liked what they saw, or they may have thought there was some good characteristics, but I'm looking directly in the mirror like I'm looking in this camera right now. And I did not like the person that I saw. And I can tell you this, in one instance, my character changed. And I'll tell you why, because I made a decision at that moment that I'll give people more than I'll take. I won't give up. I'll press in and move forward. My word will be yes. And if I say yes, I mean it. And if I say no, I mean it. That's a decision that we can make, whether we're 21, 41, 61, or 91. And I think that a lot of people in this world are making decisions to say, I'll give my employer less. I'll give my customer less. I'll give my team members less so that I can increase profit. My friend, at the end of the day, and I can prove this to you time and time again, at the end of the day, the companies that value the people, the companies that lead with purpose and vision and values are more profitable, more successful. And I just want to challenge you that it's all on a decision. If you make a decision and you want to give more to the world than you take, you'll build high level of character. But if you start with the premise that I want to take as much as possible and give as little as possible, you will start and your character will be flawed because you're living in a deficit instead of a surplus. So I would just say that it starts with a decision, and anyone can make a decision. You could have a terrible life. You could be making poor decisions your whole life, like I was up until 23. And then I made that one decision that shifted everything in my life, and you have the same potential inside of you.
Exactly. And one last thing is that I see 2 questions that are back to back that we could put as one, but on your point, we talked about it takes a long time to forge those changes, right? Those habits start to impact your character and you can start to change your character over a long time. But there are few occasions that are so dramatic enough. Someone has a heart attack, they are changing the way they eat. Something happened to them financially, something crazy happened, they got arrested, whatever the case may be, and it just something switches and you know that it's a matter of life or death mentality, that will change you as well. So, I mean, you're not going to look for those life and death situations. You're not going to look for those one in many scenarios, but you do want to be in a position where you build those habits over time to change that character. It looked like, I think that those two, if you want to consolidate them, we can answer them together.
Oh, which an anonymous attendee question,
Yeah.
first and second? Okay, so we have somebody who is anonymous. By the way, if you're anonymous, you want to get the free mentorship sessions through Alliance Pride Leadership list, please send us your contact information. So the question from this anonymous person is, what's the right balance in building rapport as a manager and separately as an employee for strong, long-lasting relationships? And I guess you want to combine with the second question, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance your approachability and authority? Can one negatively impact the other?
That's good. Can I take that one, Fareed? Yeah. So one of the things I think leaders and managers they struggle with is what is a healthy boundaries with their team members, right? And a lot of people want good relationships, but then they create this environment where there's so many boundaries around that relationship in a work environment that you really don't even have a relationship anymore, right? So I was on a coaching call earlier today, right before we jumped on this, and I was talking about the three elements of trust, right? So the three elements of trust, and you want to write this down because this is Harvard Business Review did a study of 86,000 leaders, and they said that these three things are what constitutes trust: solid relationships, good judgment and competency, and consistency. Okay. If we don't have solid relationships, then we can't have long-lasting relationships. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing in this world, and listen, this is the world that I play in. I coach companies, I develop leaders, I work with some of the largest companies, I work with entrepreneurs. If you are building a culture in your organization, which is, we don't get too close because we keep healthy boundaries. I want you to understand that you're not keeping healthy boundaries. What you're doing is you're actually keeping unhealthy relationships because you're not allowing people to connect and you're not connecting, right? What a healthy boundary is, I'm going to give you three things that you can do to create very healthy boundaries around this, okay? It's clear requests. So when you're working with people, I have some of our best friends working with us, and we don't have issues because we work with healthy boundaries. But it's clear requests, clear boundaries, clear outcomes. Let me give you what that looks like. Clear request. So when you're asking for something, you're asking it very clearly, no ambiguity. Clear outcomes. So clear boundaries. So meaning, this is how I want it to operate. So I'll give you an example. If I'm asking someone to do something, I want to give them some boundaries around what that looks like. So they understand you don't want to do this, but we can do this. We have the ability to do that. And then clear outcomes. Most people, or consequences. Most people look at it, outcomes or consequences, and say, well, that's a negative. But really, at the end of the day, if people know that if they do something not right, there's a consequence to it, a negative. But if they do something right, there's also a positive consequence, right? So that framework, clear requests, clear boundaries, clear consequences, or clear outcomes, has always been something that I've used. And the second part of it is this. When you're an insecure leader, hear me out. When you're an insecure leader, you will not allow people to get close to you because you feel like you'll be taken advantage of. And the more secure of a leader you are, and the healthier of a leader you are, you'll be able to create better boundaries that allows you to have better relationships with people. But I tell you this, trust is the element of business. Trust is the element of relationships. And if we don't have trust, we don't have anything. but you can't have trust without having relationships with people. And if we create too many boundaries in the work environment around relationships, you'll never have true trust. You'll have a facade, but not real trust.
Very true. The only thing I could even add to that was just two things. We have to see approachability and authority. I came in for the first time, even in New York Life, and one of the first things I did, and it's a little bit of a balance, because you don't want to come off assuming that the relationship exists already with people you just met. You can't assume that they're going to receive you well, but you can control yourself. And one of the first things I do is I come in and I say that I tell them the kind of manager I am, and I tell them the kind of leader I am, and I literally come in arms open, say, this is the kind of person I am. This is the kind of stuff I like to do. This is about me. And I let it sit with them for a while until they feel comfortable coming to me with a lot of that. Now, how do you balance the approachability? That's going to be a little bit of a tightrope. The most important thing, and Chad could say this all day long, I look at everyone's calendar right now. The most important thing is someone's time. When we talked about before about watering down the message, don't waste a leader's time. You want to get that time with them. You're going to have it. It's going to be brief. You make sure you make it count. You get what you need from that, and you show that what you took from them really worked for you. You show your appreciation of what that was and how you leverage that communication. If you do, they'll give you more time. If they see that they're wasting their time, you're going to start to notice that clock is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm being completely serious with you. You show that you appreciate it, you'll always get more of it. That's just how it is in this world. So I hope that answers that question. Can they impact each other? They certainly can. If you're way too open with your staff, if you don't set your own boundaries, if they feel like, to Chad's point, they could lean into the relationship too much, you didn't set your boundary straight. All right, so we answered those two. I know that we're running close on time. Chad, you have something else?
I found that rarely do I feel like team members cross boundaries when you've established a good enough trust with people.
Yep.
Because I think people don't want to break trust naturally, but most people don't know how to establish trust. So it gets broken without them even trying to break it. So on my teams, I've always realized that we have healthy boundaries, healthy relationships. We spend time together as a team, but we also know what is the boundary that you don't cross. And you don't use the friend card when you're in the office, even if you're close friends. You don't use that card. You use the card of, I'm a team member. How do we help us win? That's it. And when the team is more important than the person, meaning the team winning is more important than one person feeling good, it changes all the dynamics.
No, you're 100% right. It goes back to the Chris Auger deal about telegraphing your value system. If you let them know what means the most to you, and you let them know what those boundaries are, and you set those boundaries clear, like, hey, listen, it's great that you want to reach out to me, ask me work questions on a Sunday. That's just not going to fly. Like, let's just be realistic and let's keep it friendly. And you can always reach out to me, always, but let's be respectful of what we're trying to communicate to the rest of the team.
And Fareed, you saw that when we were in Atlanta. You came on that leadership experience with us, and we had a good amount of our team members with us. We had a lot of fun, but we had very healthy boundaries, and we had just relationships. You got to work on that, though. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight.
I totally agree with you on that. And with that being said, we're going to shoot around on these questions right now, just for the sake of it, the time. But one good question I think Alyssa asked here is, how do you find out someone's why? And this is interesting. It says, after building a relationship, you just ask them. Do you workshop it? Chad, I'm very interested in your perspective on this. Believe it or not, with me, I try to go through the rapport way, and you could chime in on this as well. I like to learn about the person themselves, learn what makes them tick in general, and then start to identify it myself, and then use constructive, like almost like active listening to kind of telegraph it back to them and say, hey, wow, looks like you're in this for the children, or you seems pretty ambitious. It looks like you're trying to get to X. Is that safe to say? And start to feel it that way. If I don't get what their why is, and it's just not becoming clear to me, after a certain amount of time, I'll just clearly ask, hey, like, what drives you? Like, what are you looking to get out of this? Because the reality is, For anyone on my team, I can't build a leadership program for them, a continuum for them, if I don't know what they want to get out of this. If they just want to nine to five it, if they just want to go home and see their kids at a certain time, if they don't want to have a subject matter expertise, I'm not going to make the investment to go in that direction. But remember, every leader wants other leaders because they want to multiply. So your investments will always follow the ones that want to be the sponge. It's just the reality of it, right? If you have a one pie, are you going to give the whole pie to the person that's going to be the worst investment? You would start to make the investments in the right way. Some people already have these abilities. They don't need to have the financial input, but leadership is not a destination. It's a constant growth. It's funny, John Cena at the academy that you mentioned, Chad, the Live to Lead, he literally said, he laughs when people talk about the peak. There is no peak. you keep thinking there's a peak, and it's a constant marathon.
Exactly. To that question for you, and Alyssa, I think this will help you. What do you cry about?
Yep.
What do you sing about? And what do you dream about?
Love that.
Those three questions help you understand a person's why. What do you cry about? What do you sing about? What do you dream about? That tells you what matters to them. What do you cry about? What do you sing about? And what do you dream about? Because what they cry about is the things that hurts their heart, the things that they want to see, the wrongs they want to see righted correctly. What do they sing about is the things that excites them, and what do they dream about is the thing that they want to accomplish one day in the future. So those three questions, if you can pull that out of people, you'll know what their why is.
Yeah, to Fareed's point, I think the true why is very difficult to get as well, because I'm the first VP and Fareed is the president of our chapter. And I'm like the guy in the back and trying to find the true why, because Fareed as a president, a lot of people are afraid to tell him the true why. And I've been doing my little research investigation. And as a leader too, you do probably need to have somebody help you find the true why, because a lot of people may not be honest on why they do certain things. And you still need to find the truth. But that's the hard part, find the true why, that's what I find.
Yeah,
great question, Lisa.
Very good, very good point. Yep. What else do we have in here?
We asked this one. What is the most difficult part of being a leader? Can I jump on that one?
Go for
it. Because I think when we talk about leadership, we make it about everyone else. And the hardest thing about being a leader is leading me. The hardest thing about being a leader is waking up in the morning, doing my time. I do a power hour in the morning. I find that to be very difficult. I have an intense calendar. Having conversations with my wife, having conversations with my family, dealing with difficult situations. But at the end of the day, the hardest part of being a leader is modeling it in your own life. A lot of the times we want to do this.
Yep.
But really, at the end of the day, what we need to be doing is saying, I'm a leader. When I lead well, so does everyone else. When I lead poorly, so does everyone else. So I've always found that my hardest struggle is me. And the better I get at that, the more I embrace developing myself, the easier it gets leading other people.
Good point. I think that was well said. I don't have to add to it. For a multiplier employee, how should managers maintain a healthy shift without causing possible burnout, Chad?
I'm sorry, say that again, Fareed. I was just reading.
For a multiplier employee, so there's the leader of leaders that you're trying to create. How should managers maintain a healthy shift without causing them to burn out?
That's a good one. So with multipliers, most multipliers are not just high performers, they're operating in their gift. And when you're operating in your strength and your gift, the energy that it takes to create something is a lot less than a person who's operating in a weakness. So when I look at organizations, I do a diagnosis without even having to look, and I look, oh, there's a multiplier, there's a divider, there's two subtractors, there's another subtractor, oh, there's another subtractor, oh, there's a divider, oh, there's a multiplier. The multipliers, they get energized by what they do because they're operating out of their strength. So I wouldn't say necessarily that you have to be concerned about burnout. The only way I would look at burnout is if they're operating in a weakness, then they'll get burned out. I could do this all day long. My wife says that sometimes, like, how can you do it? Like, literally, you can do this all day long. I'm like, yeah, well, this is something that I was designed for. So I don't get burned out by this. I actually get more energized by this. So as a manager or as a leader, we need to understand, is that person operating in a strength or a weakness? And if it's a strength, then they may be getting more energized by it than burned out by it. But if you're having them work and they're a high performer, so they always give more value, but they're not in their strength, then you got to really be careful for burnout.
Okay, now thank you for that. Well said. Just to kind of wind this down, because I know we're at the top of the hour, we're at the top of our time. So I'll just say one thing. Someone asked about, as your experience continues to grow, how do you ensure continual growth and development as a leader? I believe that there is no destination. It's just like the anticipation of going on a trip. Sometimes the travel to the destination is the funnest part of the trip. I used to love, going to the beach, but having a great time with my friends in the car going to the beach was the best time. And some of the biggest memories were really being together. So Chad, can you tell us a little bit about the Unleashing the Lion, and also tell us about the continuum with you and Wei working on with the training and development team?
Yeah, so for all of you that are on the call, I'm really excited about this. What we're doing with ISACA is we're creating a whole continuing professional education. This is all around developing you as a leader to make a greater impact in your industry. So I would say that just keep looking out for the information, because we're going to be rolling that out in the next probably 60 days around continuing education to help develop you as a leader. And then the second part of it is, if you see on the screen here, there is we have a program called Unleashing the Lion. It's a monthly mentoring where we do teaching, we develop leaders, and then we open it up for Q&A. It's an online platform. And today we gave thank you to ISACA for purchasing this, but basically ISACA New York City chapter gave 5 of those out to people that had asked questions. But for those of you that would like to get involved, you see the email right there. It says where the green arrow is, Emily@LionsPrideLeadership.com. You send her an email, she'll reply back with a link, and you can register. I think the team said that they're gonna have it open until the end of tonight for the 119, so it's 60% off the annual membership. And what happens is you're gonna get a call once a month. You're gonna jump on a call. I'm gonna be teaching on a leadership lesson. We're gonna have a 30-minute Q&A at the end where you could ask your real questions of what's going on. And the reason why we did this is that everything you and I want in our life is on us getting better. Everything's uphill. So this is an opportunity for you to develop and invest in yourself. And it's a low buy-in. It's not tremendous, huge package, but it's a group setting where you'll be able to learn, grow, ask your questions, and keep coming back every month. So I would encourage you to do it. I'll put in the email here in the chat box as well. So let me put that there.
Yeah, we'll send Sam, please send that email if you can afterwards, just on the flyer for that 60% discount. And then something else there, Wei, if you want to talk with about the program we have kicking off next year with Kwang, Mei, and Lance.
Yeah, so I don't want to take the full credit for it. We have a great training development team. I just oversee them, but where Kwang Mei To and Lance Flacco, again, like Chad Reyes mentioned, that we're going to have training development sessions on leadership with Chad. And also we're going to have sometimes possibly on the academic relations side as well. So that's going to be a lot of things coming up. It's a very exciting year we're going to have next year. I still can't, we don't have full details, but it's going to be upcoming, and we'll let you guys know when information comes along.
Thank you for that, Wei. And just kind of a closing remark on that. At the end of it, you'll be able to receive a certificate, both by Lions Pride Leadership and ISACA Metropolitan New York chapter, on completion of the leadership program, which it's amazing thing to kind of put in the resume. And the last remark here, they said, what advice do you have for managers and employees wanting to live by example? My biggest thing I would say is be as genuine as you possibly can. Telegraph your throws as it relates to leadership. Be as straightforward with your team. Work on the communication and the messaging, and setting those boundaries is a big way to live by example in terms of letting your team know where you stand. The biggest obstacle is just not knowing. It puts your team in a weird nebulous view. They did just like an esoteric. I think they kind of want us to do it. You don't make them guess. Let them know where you're at. Tell them exactly what your value system is. Show your appreciation to your team. Really take the time to learn about your team. And I really, really believe that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I really believe that. It says a lot about leadership in general. The team needs to know that you're acting in their best interest. And it goes both ways. You know, you do good, you tell someone that they're doing good, they want to do even better. And it goes both ways, right? Makes your life easier. So Chad, if you want to add to that, but that's my closing remark.
I was gonna say the same thing that you said. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I wanted to add on to that is that decisions matter. Every decision we make either helps us gain influence with people and positively impact their lives, or erodes it. And like I did at 23 years old, every single person has that ability to make a decision that could change their life. So
I mean, the key is being an authentic leader. I mean, that's all this. I mean, I don't think there might be so-called secrets, but I think that's the real secret sauce. To be a true leader, you gotta be very authentic, and you know, and a problem like when you lead, you know, people are not stupid. You know, we lie to them, they'll find out eventually. So eventually, it's gonna have issues. You're gonna have issues with credibility in the future. But yeah, to Freeze and Chad's perspective, I mean, this is the true leadership we're talking about here, not like a one-off deal. But yeah, being authentic is very important.
It was an honor, guys. Thank you very much for attending. Chad, thanks for your time. Wade, thanks for leading us.
Yep.
Sam, for
Thanks, Reed
technicals.
and Chad.
Have a great one.
Hey
all right,
guys.
all the best.
Take
Bye.
care.